Hello all and welcome to another Hyperblue Deep Dive. The main goal of this video is to figure out if the player can piece together what's actually going on in the game Deliriant, since there's no exposition or dialogue. I also guess this is my attempt to really get my bang for my buck, and I mean that literally since the game did cost $1. I feel like there's more to this game than I experienced in my past playthroughs, but I'm just not getting it. I'll explain more as I go, so enjoy this deep dive of Deliriant. For those that have never played Deliriant, here's a timeline of events. You explore a nameless protagonist's house, pick things up, and that's about it. Certain items make the wallpaper flash and move, and others cause a hole to open up in the living room. The hole leads to a dark void with several doors. Every door leads back to the house, and the game ends. And that's the game in a nutshell. With that out of the way, let's dive into Deliriant. Quick note though, unlike my Darkseid deep dive, I don't really have a true hypothesis for this game. I only want to know if there's something that I missed that helps explain the plot of the game. So if I had to make a hypothesis, it's just that there's a story hidden in here and that I have to find the clues. Basically, my hypothesis is there is more to Deliriant than the game lets on. To start things off, I'm going to point out what the developers think they accomplished with Deliriant. I did mention this in my game review of the game, but it bears repeating. Remember, Deliriant is supposed to be a visually beautiful slice of the 1970s that takes a subtle approach to the exploration of serious topics like abuse, coping mechanisms, and familial relationships. Ben Steele, one of the 12 people who worked on this, is the person responsible for this quote. The game's story apparently started out as a story about gaslighting and its effects on an individual. To quote Ben Steele again, "What emerged is an experiment in empathy. A victim of intense suffering cannot get over their trauma because their mind relives that event again and again, keeping it inescapably cemented in their thoughts. So, what if your own home, every room, every object, every person who lives there, was the very prison of obligation that trapped you within your suffering? How would you escape? Could you?" Sadly, after playing through Deliriant again, I still don't see their vision. That being said, I am going to take a look at 3 things to answer my main question of whether or not the game has enough info to decipher what's going on. I'm going to try to answer the following questions. What causes the wallpaper to flash colors and move? What causes the hole to open up? And what is the big picture in an exposition-less game? Let's get started. I'm going to start by looking for meaning in the objects that cause the wallpaper to change color and move. Remember, the main protagonist is experiencing some form of depression, so the items that trigger a change in her world have to be important to her story. All of the wallpaper color altering items seem to be located in the master bedroom. The first item is the praying baby doll on the table. In fact, the color change does originate from behind this doll. I'm not really sure what this baby doll represents here, but it may be related to the next item though, so let's talk about that. The next item is the pregnancy book on the protagonist's nightstand. I'm beginning to think that the protagonist may want another kid, and I'm actually basing this assumption on 2 things. The first is the book that I just mentioned, and the second is a pregnancy test box that's found in the trash can on the first floor. Maybe the protagonist was pregnant and lost a baby, or maybe she reached menopause. Again, I'm not sure. It's unclear because we don't know much about the character. My initial thought is that the praying doll represents her desire for a child, but again, I'm not sure. Regardless, it does seem that the protagonist is going through something related to childbirth, pregnancy, or lack thereof. The third item that I found that causes the wallpaper to change is the pair of handcuffs on the father's side of the bed. This could insinuate a lot of things. Things like, well, the couple is kinky, the father likes to be rough during lovemaking, or he could just be abusive in general. Either way, it's a cause of stress for the protagonist, so the walls start flashing. And this also ties into Ben's quote about abuse, so I suppose that matches up. The last item that I found in the room that messes with the walls is the protagonist's prescription medication in the bathroom. Picking this up causes the wallpaper to move around, probably simulating that the character is tripping on her meds. The medication bottle does not name the medicine, so it's hard to pinpoint the exact side effects, but given the walls move after taking it, one can imagine it's a pretty heavy drug. There are other items within the bedroom that cause the wallpaper to move or change color as well, but I can't really identify them. Some of the other items include the box under the nightstand and the rings on the dresser. It's almost like the developers didn't actually put any thought into this and didn't trust the player to find the correct item. The fact that almost every item changes the wallpaper kind of screws up the hypothesis a bit, but I'll keep exploring the game regardless. So, this poor woman seems to be going through something traumatic. She may have lost a child, or may be in an abusive relationship with her husband. I'm leaning towards the protagonist being in an abusive relationship and possibly being pregnant with a baby she did not necessarily agree to have. So, why not leave? This game is set in the 1970s, and while divorce was a thing, I feel like most couples stuck it out. For better or for worse, am I right? So, if that's the case here, then she stuck around for A, her kids, and B, because the father probably promised to be better. In the game though, we're trapped. There's no exit until you explore the house. Even then, the exit just leads back to the house. And that exit comes in the form of a giant hole in the wall by the front of the house. So, what's up with the hole in the wall? When the game begins, after the white screen, we're in the front of the house. There's no door there, only a wall. Throughout the game, a hole will start to appear, and the size of the hole gradually grows larger and larger based on how many rooms you explore. To be honest though, I believe there are multiple items that can start the hole. The game requires you to visit 4 rooms to cause the hole to reach its final size. All the items I mentioned in the master bedroom that cause the walls to move add size to the hole. When it comes to the husband's office, I found that looking at the photographs on the floor can increase the size as well. For the children's room, the flower and the stuffed rabbit will help increase the size. Lastly, the whiskey bottle in the family room opens the hole more. I'm not sure if it's important or not, but the bottle that I'm referring to is the bottle you can walk around with. Each of the items I mentioned point to trauma in the protagonist's life and drive her desire to escape her prison. Of course, attempting to escape just leads back to the house, so escaping is ultimately futile. So one can sort of glean some information from items used to drive the game experience, but can we learn more from the other things found within the house? The story that I believe that I'm getting from Deliriant is actually similar to a short story I read called The Yellow Wallpaper. The story is a tale of a woman with postpartum depression who is isolated in a room and eventually goes mad. I do feel like Deliriant is not as interesting as that story though, but it does share similarities. The main character of the short story grows more and more interested in the wallpaper of the room she's in, and the wallpaper in Deliriant becomes more interesting as the player progresses. Also, in the story, the main character begins to strip the wallpaper away from the wall, and in Deliriant, there's a doorway that gradually grows larger in the wallpaper near the beginning. Coincidence? Well, maybe. But a copy of the yellow wallpaper is on the protagonist's nightstand, and it will cause the wallpaper to change colors, so I think it's safe to say the comparison is fine. The main protagonist feels trapped in the house, and that's why after going through the hole in the front of the house into the void, that all the doors lead back and there's truly no escape. Speaking of doors, it's also interesting to note that each of the doors on the second floor have chain locks on them. So this just continues to drive the comparison between the short story and Deliriant of a woman being locked away in a room. Focusing on the kids for a second, I do love how there's drawings that were clearly made by a young kid, but also a paper with advanced level math on it. This makes me think that the family had 2 kids that were very spaced apart, and that the protagonist was expecting another due to the pregnancy test in the bathroom. Actually, speaking of drawings, there's actually one more thing I can point to that indicates what's going on. There are several children's drawings littered throughout the house. These drawings are scribbled on the walls with crayon and are very hard to see. These drawings will disappear if you get too close, and you do have to look at them from the right angle. There may be a way to get them to stay permanently, but I haven't figured it out yet. These drawings depict a variety of things, but the most notable ones are depictions of the parents fighting while the child is hiding because she's scared. There's clearly something going on in this house, but without dialogue or text, the message is lost. So back to whether or not you can figure out the story based on the things players can discover in the game. I'm ultimately going to say no. Not without reading the author's comments prior to the game, that is. Without exposition, this is nothing more than me guessing at what could be. Now, if you read the author's comments first, then yeah, maybe you can piece things together like I'm trying to. That being said though, I do believe there are some things that are clear. The parents are clearly alcoholics, well at least the father anyway. There's a good amount of liquor in the family room, and the husband's office is littered with beer cans, and there's a flask on his desk as well. I'm guessing he may frequently get drunk and be a violent drunk on top of that. The mother seems like she wants to be a good mom given all the self-help mother books she has. Again, I'm only inferring that there's some form of abusive relationship based on the things I see from the game and what I read from the author's comments. I'm also only assuming there's a surprise pregnancy based on the items as well. This could be what's going on, but again, it's hard to surmise when there's no dialogue. So, that being said, not sure if I actually did answer my question, but you never know, maybe another playthrough will help shed some light on the story. Well, that wraps up today's discussion. Hope you enjoyed this little deep dive. As always, thank you for watching.